What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, two-time welterweight world champion, superstar boxer, Showtime Shawn Porter, weighs in on this past Saturday's pay-per-view mega extravaganza between undefeated two-division world champion, currently the middleweight WBC world champion superstar boxer Jermall Charlo, and his twin brother, his identical twin brother, who is a two-time junior middleweight world champion, and he has captured the unified WBC, IBF, WBA, IBO, Ring Magazine, Lineal Junior Middleweight World Championship. With that, obviously, Shawn Porter was asked about the future of these two fighters. One in particular they highlighted was Jermall at 160 after defeating Sergey Derevyanchenko in an impressive fashion, right? And Shawn Porter had this to say. He says he definitely feels like he's the man at middleweight right now. He says, and he was impressed by his outing against Sergey Derevyanchenko. He says, but he needs to face undefeated two-division world champion and currently the WBO middleweight world champion, Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade. Now, if you don't know, Shawn Porter has a relationship with Demetrius Andrade. They're friends. But Shawn Porter highlights and says, if you remove me and my relationship with Demetrius Andrade, I'm picking Demetrius Andrade all day. From studying and watching how the Charlos approach to the sport, their shortcomings and what they struggle with, their strengths and their weaknesses. He says they struggle with guys with movement. He says, so Demetrius Andrade don't get mentioned because he doesn't have the biggest belt, the most known belt. He has the WBO title. He says that's not the most popular belt. So because of that, he gets overlooked. He says, but it's no coincidence that Jermall Charlo overlooks and never mentions Demetrius Andrade's name. He said the reason is because he knows that more than likely he will lose to Demetrius Andrade because Demetrius Andrade is too much for him. He says he's a southpaw. He's probably the most rangy guy within the sport of boxing. He's very athletic. He has a high ring generalship. He says that, and he has high boxing IQ, right? So meaning that his skill set is very, very high. He says, and what gives the Charlos, both of them, the most problems is mobile fighters. He says, so what worse matchup can you have than Demetrius Andrade, who's a southpaw, with the skill set, probably the best set of skills in the sport of boxing, with the range, most rangy. So he could touch him from a distance, and he's very, very mobile. So he says that that's the reason why you never hear Jermall Charlo make mention of Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade's name. He says, and it works in Jermall Charlo's favor that the business side of it works against Demetrius Andrade because he is not a star, right? He's not business, I don't want to say business savvy. He's not business, how did he put it? In other words, he don't make sense business-wise, right? Because he just don't bring in revenue. He's just not an attraction. Hardcore boxing fans obviously know who Demetrius Andrade is, but casual boxing fans don't know who he is because of the business part of the sport of boxing that just keeps him from being well known, right? And he says that he's picking Demetrius Andrade all day to beat, Jermall Charlo. He says that, but he does pick Jermall Charlo to beat Gennady Triple G Golovkin, and he don't know who he will favor with Jermall and Saul Canelo Alvarez, because when it comes to Saul Canelo Alvarez, he's not mobile. You understand? But he says, I'm proud that they got through their first pay-per-view event. He said, I would like to see Boo Boo Andrade fight Jermall at 160. I would love to see that fight. But right now, Charlo is the best 160-pound fighter out there, and so is his brother at 154. Like I said, he said he's the best out there, but, he would pick Andrade. And the reason he got to go with Charlo is because he's getting, all the accolades, right? When talking about Jermall Charlo and what his struggles, his shortcomings, he says it's almost like when they're dealing with mobile boxers, they are always a step behind every time with their reactions, with guys that are busy and with guys that are moving. I think Boo Boo is that guy that can move and bring that fight to you. He's probably the most rangy guy in boxing, and he has a southpaw, and he's a southpaw. So there would be a lot for Charlo at 160 to prepare for and get in a ring with Boo Boo Andrade, right? So there would be a lot for Charlo at 160 to prepare for and get in the ring with Andrade, right? He says, I said that's probably why Jermall Charlo, doesn't mention his name, because he knows that's a tough fight for him and a tough fight to get prepared for, right? It's definitely the business side that why Jermall Charlo and Andre haven't fought, right? He said Charlo focuses on guys that management puts him in there with him, and he doesn't call out a lot of fighters. So, he's saying that, he pretty much, goes his business as usual, right? He's just saying that Demetrius Andrade's style is very, very difficult for Jermall Charlo. So he says he feels like Jermall Charlo just put Demetrius Andrade in his rearview mirror because he is not busy, because Andre just doesn't have a big belt, because Andre is not business friendly at this point. So he's saying because he has the WBO title, he's not business friendly, meaning he don't bring in a lot of revenue, and he's not that active on top of it. But he believes that Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade is a nightmare for Jermall Charlo. And to a degree, I have to agree with him. But the thing is, Jermall Charlo is making strides and getting better every outing, even at the age of 30. He's making more and more improvements every time you see him in the ring. One point in time, he was just like a counter power puncher, right? Now, he's setting up his punches even more so than he was prior. He's changing levels better. He is very flat-footed in his approach. And Demetrius Andrade is rangy. He's probably about the same height, maybe an inch shorter than the Charlo twins, than Jermall Charlo, should I say. But he has long range, and he has a high ring IQ, and he's very, very slick. He's defensively savvy, right? So that makes Demetrius Andrade a very, very tough out. And so I agree that that's the toughest fight. After the fight with Jermall Charlo, I said that the fight that I most likely want to see is Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo. Demetrius Andrade, is 6 foot, 6'1", and he has nearly a 74-inch arm reach. He's 29-0 with 18 by way of knockout. Let's look at Jermall Charlo. Excuse me, y'all. So he's 6 feet tall with a 74-inch arm reach, and he's very rangy. He's undefeated as well. So stylistically, yes, I do think he will give Jermall Charlo tons and tons of problems, right? Because he's very mobile. Jermall Charlo is 31-0, 22 by way of knockout. He's 6 feet tall with 74-inch arm reach. So they are the same height. They are the same size. They have the same, but the difference is Demetrius Andrade is more fluid on his feet, and he's quicker. He's more athletic, on his feet. Jermall Charlo is more flat-footed, and he's more lethargical in his approach, right? He's a counter puncher, and at times he could appear to be very stiff, where Andrade is more fluent. But the difference is Jermall Charlo definitely has a lot of power. He's very disciplined in the ring, and he sets up his punches. He doesn't waste punches. So this would be definitely, in my opinion, a 50-50 fight. But Jermall Charlo is going to be the favorite in that fight, should it come to fruition. And it needs to come to fruition because it's a unification bout for Jermall Charlo as well. He has the opportunity to pick up the WBO strap. And it's perfect, in my opinion, for Jermall Charlo. to bolster his career. He just defeated Sergey Derevyanchenko, who was the technician, and people thought that was going to give Jermall Charlo all types of tons of problems because of his movement, because of his ring generalship, because of his ability to use so many different angles. And Jermall Charlo's flat-footed and just right there in front of you. Sergey Derevyanchenko was going to give him so many problems, and he proved that not to be the case, right? He passed that test with flying colors. And like I said, Sergey Derevyanchenko did have success at times in the fight, but for the most part, Jermall Charlo dominated that fight. Here goes another opportunity for him to prove that, he can make adjustments to all styles, and Demetrius Andrade is undefeated. In Sergey Derevyanchenko's case, we saw him lose to Danny Jacobs. That was a validated loss. Gennady Golovkin, I thought Sergey Derevyanchenko won that fight, but nonetheless, he was in 2 tough fights prior to Jermall Charlo, and he had already lost. Here's the opportunity for him to, put a blemish on Demetrius Andrade's resume, who's undefeated and who's a 2-division world champion, just like Jermall Charlo. And there's a history, there's a storyline. People been, pitting them together for quite some time. And for this to finally come to fruition would be absolutely huge. It would be enormous. This is another opportunity for him to prove his wealth, right? And prove his case that he deserves the fight with Canelo Alvarez. He's talked about possibly going up to 168 and challenging, David Benavidez. I think that he will beat David Benavidez. I think he's more versatile than David Benavidez. So on the inside, David Benavidez usually has the advantage. He won't have that advantage. I think that Jermall Charlo is just as strong, if not stronger, but he has quicker hands than David Benavidez. He has more power than anybody David Benavidez have faced. And he's more versatile with a boxing. His jab is like a piston, and what stops movement, timing, what stops speed and movement is timing. And he has great timing, especially with his jab. So that would give Demetrius Andrade a lot of problems, because Demetrius Andrade, on the flip side of that, has never seen a guy like Jermall Charlo, who has that type of jab, who's very disciplined and, is very active jab. So that's going to be very difficult for Demetrius Andrade to figure out the puzzle of getting around Jermall Charlo's jab. And he has a beautiful right uppercut. He's a beautiful counterpuncher. So this is a difficult fight for both guys. So I would have to say it's definitely a 50-50 fight that Jermall Charlo will be favored in, but it needs to happen because it's definitely a unification bout. So it's a lucrative fight for Jermall Charlo. But like Shawn Porter stated, he's just not business friendly because he's not active and he don't have these big fights. So he gets overlooked, out of sight, out of mind. But drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.